It is Sunday, June 16th, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. Happy Father's Day. I am Elisa Bielatich Davis, and this is Everyday Orthodox. We get together here every Sunday night just to meet another everyday Orthodox Christian, and I feel like this is our little contribution to Orthodox unity. This is here in North America, we're all divided up, right? We worship in different jurisdictions, which can mean that we're on different calendars, we're speaking different languages, and ultimately, we're also divided up a lot regionally, right? So often I find that I have neighbors who turn out to be Orthodox for 5 or 6 years, and I don't even realize it till one day they have to be wearing like an icon bracelet or something, right? We don't know. We don't know where all the Orthodox people are around us, and we don't know everybody well enough. But, if we really want to be one church here in America, I think it's not so much about administrative unity as it is about how we feel about one another and whether or not we know one another and think of each other as our brothers and sisters. So this is our little contribution. We'll get together here on Sunday nights. We'll get to know one another, get to know people from all different jurisdictions and all over the place. And I think we'll have a lot of fun while we're doing it. So I think it's a pretty fun project. Tonight, as always, Matushka Trudy Richter is right here answering your calls and producing the program. So if you decide you have a question for our guest, you can always call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346, and you can ask a question, and Matushka will put you right through. So without any further ado, I do have to tell you. So I do have some more. I have a little further ado. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Ancient Faith Ministries page. And then after the show's over, the video version of the show is archived there on the YouTube channel. And then we also have the audio-only podcast stream, and that is live streaming on the AFR app, on Ancient Faith Radio's website at ancientfaith.com/radio/live, and also on Facebook Live. And those are archived on the Ancient Faith Radio website. So if you're bored or if you're going for a walk or, you don't know what to do with yourself, you're cleaning your kitchen, turn it on. You can play some of our back episodes, some of the ones that you missed, and you can get to know some more Orthodox people. All right. Now, I have no further ado. So now we'll move forward. You are going to be excited about tonight's guest, and most of you have probably already heard of her. If you have children, you already know this name. Her name is Kristi Tartara, and she's a children's book illustrator. So she has illustrated a lot of really beautiful Orthodox children's books. She's actually also the author of an Orthodox children's book. And so I'll tell you about her a little bit. She's of Greek background, and her Yiayia she had a beautiful faith. And so we'll talk about her a bit and her impact on Christina. And when Christina was later, as an adult, she was diagnosed with MS and with Lyme disease. And she really took those lessons that she learned from her grandmother to heart, and she leaned into prayer and she leaned into the church. And through all of that struggle, which, these are things that we don't want, and these struggles we don't want, but they do tend to turn us into better people and different people, and all these amazing things come out of it. For Christina, it also happens that through that struggle, that's how she discovered that she wanted to be an illustrator and an author of Orthodox children's books. So it worked out well for the rest of us as well, because those books are really beautiful. But all right, without any further ado, I'm saying it again, I'm realizing I can say that a lot. Christina, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to finally get a chance to talk to you because I feel like I've seen your books for years and my kids have read your books and I love your illustrations, and it's just so nice to have you on the show and get a chance to talk to you. So tell me, where does your story begin? Where were you born?
I was born in Akron, Ohio, and I grew up at Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church there.
Nice.
Yeah, and I went to school to become a teacher, and I knew I always wanted to illustrate books, so I was like, yeah, I'll never do it. It's too hard. So, but we'll get to the rest of the story later.
It's too hard. It's just impossible to do it.
I was like, yeah, there's no way. But, God had other plans.
That's the thing, right? When God wants you to do something, hard things become simpler, or at least the path gets smoother, I think. But, well, let's not jump ahead, though. So tell me, so you grew up in Akron your whole life? Were were you there? So were you guys right in town, or were you kind of in the suburbs? And what was your family like?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs. Our church was in downtown Akron, right by a university. So it was a very busy, place to be. But we lived outside of there, kind of in the country. There were farms all around and stuff, and we had a lot of land. So it was a lot of fun. I was outside a lot,
Oh, that's
playing. We had
great.
a stream in the back where we would catch minnows to feed our ducks.
That's awesome.
So,
That's beautiful. I
yeah.
love that. I grew up a little bit out in the country as well, and it's just it's a neat way to grow up, right? You're kind of close to the earth a little bit. You're out there running around in the trees, and especially back then, whenever we were just allowed to run around as long as we wanted, so we just disappeared
Yeah.
for all day. But so you had siblings. You said we, so I'm assuming were there multiple kids in your family, or who was that?
Yeah, I have a younger brother, and he still lives close to my parents. I live a little bit further away now. After I got married, we had to move for my husband's job a little bit, but we're not that far, like a half hour
Oh, that's
from
not
my
bad at
parents.
all.
Yeah.
No, and a half
Hmm.
hour might be nice actually. You get a little bit of space, but you're still close enough.
Yeah.
If something goes sideways, you're there, no problem. But
Oh, yeah.
okay, so as you're growing up, did you love art? Like, were you drawing a lot? Were you writing?
Yes, my first book was when I was in second grade. It was about the characters were named after my parents, and it was about this girl and her brother ended up having a sleepover. So she was on her own. She found a four-leaf clover in the parking lot of Kmart, and so she was very excited. And then her brother ended up having to leave, so she got the house to herself. So
This
that
is a
was the
great
story.
book.
And the boy was named after my dad, and yeah, it was really fun.
Oh, that's
So,
so
but
cute.
yeah, I was always like, everyone would tell me, oh, you're good at art, you should do art. I always was winning, like not big awards or anything, but if there was like
Right.
an art show or something, I would always get an award, and I always was like, yeah, but I'm not really that good at it. I'm not good enough. So I always kind of like was just like, I never really pursued it. I was always doing something, but not like as a job or anything.
So, did you
So,
feel like there are just very few people can be professional artists, and they're just so incredibly talented from age 6 that like it's already too late for you? Is that kind of what the thinking process was?
yeah, I mean, I always felt like everyone else's art. I mean, this is a problem with artists in general. If you talk to them, like everyone else's art is better and everyone else's art is, more advanced. But, I didn't really have like a lot of classes to teach me. Now with the internet, you can learn anything you want, I
Yes.
watched a lot of YouTube videos or Skillshare, things like that. um it's just it really to be an artist, it just takes a lot of practice. You can have some talent, but you've really got to just practice and practice and practice, and you'll get better and better and better.
And do you have the kind of personality that will do that, where you'll practice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like like if I can't draw on any day, like it really bothers me if I can't draw. Like I really need that drawing, like it really helps me. I especially love to draw in the evening, like everyone's watching TV, and I just like to draw on my iPad, and like kind of it's relaxing for me.
Oh, that's
Um,
neat.
yeah. And
So,
every
so
job I've had, all I could think about is like, what could I create? What can I do? Not necessarily drawing, but I was always thinking about creative things. And I'm like, I just need a job where I'm creative all the time.
well, okay, so
So,
as you're growing up, you're drawing, you're writing stories, and so you were very creative as a kid, but you felt like probably not
mhm,
professionally creative, just creative in general, just creative for fun. But so, what were
mhm.
you thinking would be like your career as a life? Were you wanting to be a teacher from a young age, or what was the plan?
Well, I started in graphic design in college, but it was drawing because I was going to be an illustrator, but because they didn't have an illustration program, so you had to do graphic design, and was cutting out these little tiny squares exact. Like, I mean, this ruler was insane. The measurements were so teeny tiny, and then you had to take a magnifying glass and put it on top to make sure it matched. And I didn't come from like a very you know, some kids came from high schools that had tons of art classes. Like I
Mm.
kind of like was able to get into one because the teacher, like my schedule didn't allow for it, and he let me come during study hall to his like to do art. So,
Oh,
I mean, I didn't have the same skills, and it was just too stressful. Because I'm like, I can't get it right. Like, this isn't art. It's just cutting squares out of paper.
right? Isn't that
So,
crazy? But that's so interesting,
yeah,
right?
but I mean,
Because
it
the
taught
life
me
of
a
a
lot about
graphic
design.
designer, but graphic designers aren't like cutting squares all day long, right? Like it is interesting. It's like in architecture, they have architecture students building these models, and it's very time consuming and very meticulous. And then it turns out
Mhm.
when you get out of school, you never do it again. It's like,
Right?
interesting. So this is how our education
Yeah.
system works. Like, it feels a little
Right?
questionable to tell you the truth, but that's
Right.
a shame though because you
Well,
didn't really have access
yeah.
to great art classes in high school, and then you're trying to go to college and do it, and it's not really what you need either. It's not really
Right.
helpful for illustration.
Well, yeah, and then computers, I was in the late 90s, early 2000s, so computers were still, I wasn't 100% comfortable with them, and I knew that after a couple years in the program, it was all on the computer, and that kind of scared me too. But then I ended up loving computers and being good at it. So, I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I should have done that. But oh, well, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm glad I chose teaching because as an educator, I learned how children read. It was my degree is preschool to third grade. So I've worked with struggling readers. I've worked with kids. I understand, like, we had a whole class learning about play and like how their imaginations are and all of that. And so, to have that background, that really helps as an illustrator because I kind of maybe see things differently than someone who has never studied children. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so in the end, it
So,
really worked out. It works out very well. So
yeah.
that's good. It is interesting though. There were
Yeah.
those years where the computers just sort of seemed weird and
Yeah.
scary and on the side. I remember those years. I remember I was in school and they tried to
Yeah.
make us have email addresses, and we were all like, "No
Oh,
one's ever going to use this. This is dumb. Why am I doing this?" But look at us
yep.
now. Look at us now. We're on the internet right
Right?
now. Amazing, amazing. But okay, as you're going through all of that, then when did you change majors? Like how far along were you? How long did you do graphic design before
Um,
you were like enough
only
comes
one
first?
semester.
Oh,
Yeah. And
that was
then my
quick.
friend, she was an education major and she invited me to come. There was a community center and they were helping children read. She's like, we really need volunteers. Will you please come? And I'm like, sure, I'll come. And I just like this little girl struggled so much and I just loved helping her. I was like, oh my gosh, I helped her to read. Like she felt good about herself. Like she left feeling happy and good. And I was like, I want to make kids like happy like that. I want to help them to be confident in their abilities. So that's kind of what then I like just changed it to early childhood and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's
I miss
great.
being with kids in the classroom, but
Yeah. No, it's neat. That's
it's hard.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
really neat. What ends up happening? You didn't tell us how you met your husband or how any of that happened. He just suddenly was there and he went off to school. How did you meet your husband?
Well, I was one of the few young adults that were at church, and so I was in charge of getting all the young adults together and doing like Bible studies and different things like that. And he actually had gone to seminary and got his master's of divinity. And he was working at the church as the youth director. And so I went up to him and I was like, hey, now that you work here, I need you to help me get people to come to Bible study, okay? And so we went out and talked about it and made a plan. And then after that, like it was like, I don't know, we just never stopped talking.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so adorable. So,
Yeah.
was he planning to be a priest? Was that the plan?
Yes, he was. He was planning to be a priest. But
Did it-
then he changed his mind. Like there's just a lot to it. It's not just about like he wants to help people is what he wants
yeah,
to do. But there's like a lot of politics and different things that go into it. And, it's just,
yeah.
you're not going to
It's
make everybody happy. And that's really hard.
yeah, it is.
So,
Well, and I think
he was
that's
like, I don't
really
know if I want that stress of that
I
part.
think
You know what I mean? It's
as
hard
I
because you have to
do.
be nice. He wants to care for people, but then you have to say no to people and they get very upset. So,
I think it's a hard job, and it's really not for everyone. And it's like, if you want to
Yeah.
help people, there are other ways to help people also. And now he has all this theological knowledge. And there are a lot of people who
Mm-hmm.
go get their Masters of Divinity and then don't become priests. And they're just, people in the
Right.
church who know a lot, and that's super helpful. So I think that's excellent. But
Yeah.
I also appreciate that he discerned that it wasn't for him, because it really is problematic when we have a priest where it's really not his thing, and there he is, and everybody's kind of stuck. So it's good. Thank God. So what I would love to know, though, is, tell me a little bit about your grandmother, because I know in the intro I talked about her, and we kind of zipped right past her. Tell me about your grandmother's story.
So my Yiayia, her name was Mary, and she grew up in Greece during World War II, and so did my grandfather. But the Nazis, a lot of people don't talk about it, but the Nazis had a very strong presence on the Peloponnese in Greece, and they did a lot of terrible things to people. And my Yiayia, her father was captured by the Nazis, him and a bunch of other people, and the group of the men, one of them tried to escape. And when he tried to escape, the Nazis shot all of them. And then another man pretended to be dead. He was underneath all the other bodies. So that's how we know the story. And just a couple weeks ago, I was in Greece, and I got to see the monument. There's a monument there for where all these men passed away. And I got to see it for the first time. And it was so beautiful to be there. And in the story, we know that he died holding on to a tree branch. He was trying to hold himself up, and that's how he passed. And when we went there, there was this mulberry tree, and there was an icon hanging in the tree. I'm like, this is weird. Why on a tree? Is this his tree, or was this? I'm getting chills about it. Just to be there was like so amazing. And to see what it looked like, because this is a place that I had always thought about. Like, you have it in your imagination of how it happened, and I think about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like so terrible, and so it was just really amazing to see it in person. And we got to we sang the memorial, Memory Eternal song there at the site. But that icon in the tree, it was just like really strange to me. Like, why was it hanging in there?
That's beautiful, though. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So did it look like you had pictured it? I mean, because I know what you mean, right? You hear this story again and again, and in your head you have this image of it. Did it seem like what you thought it was supposed to be like, or was it totally different?
It was a little different. I always thought it was, the mountains were there, but they were more behind where the place was than in front of it, like where the memorial was. But, I'd been to Greece before, just not to the memorial. So I kind of knew what Greece, kind of what it looked like. So it was really beautiful to be there.
That's
so my Yiayia, so he died. And then her older sister died in childbirth soon after that. And then her mother died soon after that. So she had 3 major deaths back to back. So she was left an orphan. And she had 3 other siblings. So there were 4 of them. And the older sister's husband was like, I can't take care of you. And so he sent them to another village with an aunt and uncle to live. And they already had 4 kids. And the Nazis had already come to their house and burned it down and took the uncle away to a concentration camp. He had dynamite in his basement because he was letting, they were trying to build this major highway through them. And so he was storing the dynamite there for the government, and they thought it was to be used against them. So that's why they took him. So the aunt had her own children, plus these 4 children, and they had to live in the chicken coop. And I got to see that chicken coop when I went with my Yiayia in 2003. We went to Greece together because she wanted to go one last time. So I got to see, and that's where all these stories came out, because it was so painful for her. We could never ask questions or talk about, her past. So it was really beautiful to be there with her, back in 2003, where I could hear all of this come out. And I brought my journal with me because I wrote down all her stories. I was telling my parents, well, right here, this is where this happened or that happened, because I like to document those things.
Oh, it's so good that you did that, right? I mean, it's important, I think, to be really present while they're telling this story, but then to be able to go back and be like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to record everything because it's so important, and it's our family history.
Yeah.
And it is an interesting thing that, I think that in some ways people whose families are not somewhat recent immigrants, over the last couple hundred years, they may not have any experience of, these stories that are so intense and so crazy. And you just, you're looking at someone who has persevered, but who endured, like you said, back to back deaths of really important people in her life. How did she handle all of that?
Yeah, I mean, she should have been bitter and, angry and all of those things, but she was not. She was the kindest person, and everyone who met her would say how kind she is. She, everything always came back to God, and that's why I really want to talk about her. This isn't about me. This is about her. She helped me through when I had my own health struggles, and I felt like I was at the lowest point of my life. But, she always would tell us, we have to take what's coming. That was one thing she would always say. And you have to thank God for everything. They didn't have food to eat. They didn't have whatever. And so, we knew we had to be grateful. We didn't want to eat whatever food, but she was like, you have to be grateful. You have food to eat. I only had dandelions to eat. She's like, there was nothing. So you just really grow up learning to be grateful for all those things. And then they came to America. My papu worked several jobs. They did everything, and they had a decent life, but the faith part is what was at the core for being. It was always about God.
Wow.
And in her later life, she had a stroke and couldn't speak or move much. And this is just there's two stories, but the one, this therapy dog would come, not for her, it was for someone else in the building, but always had to say hi to her every time. And nobody knew why. They're like, she just has to say hi to your grandmother. And I'm like, I know why. I feel like my Yiayia spirit, it's like you feel her presence. She's like, and I remember because what do? She can't talk, she can't whatever. And I'm not going to just sit there and talk about myself. So I'd put on the proclamacy service for her and would sit there and I would sing it, and we'd pray together. And you could feel her prayers in the room. You felt her prayers. It's just, I can't really describe it. You felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. It was just you just want to cry and you can't move. And you're just wow. It's so amazing. And I would feel warm. I was like, oh my gosh, is it hot in here? It was you could feel those prayers. She's just a very special woman.
Wow. That is beautiful. Well, and I think
maybe
that's
it
true.
sounds crazy, but
no, it doesn't sound crazy at all to me, because honestly, there are certain experiences in life that are really difficult, and there's this choice that people make. And they can either sort of lean into God and the church, and then it becomes this purifying fire that really helps them see what matters, right? And it helps them develop into a very holy person. Or, sometimes people just become very bitter and angry and they kind of spin but that's very self-focused, right? If we're always looking at our own suffering and mad about it, then we kind of just go downhill real fast. We kind of drop into the abyss.
right.
But when someone like your grandmother goes through things like that and holds tight to God, they do become holy, right? That's why we recognize saints in the church, because there is such a thing as a truly holy person. Thank God. Thank God. That's beautiful. So she was still alive when you were diagnosed, or was it more her presence that was helping you? How long did she live? Was she pretty?
Yeah. Well, she passed in 2018. So I got diagnosed in 2014, but she
was pretty old. She made it. How long did she live?
She was
90s?
89 when she passed.
Oh, 89?
She was 89.
Yeah. These are
Yeah.
good genes. You have good genes. That's very
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. But May her memory be eternal. But so was she, when you say that she helped you through this hard time in your life, is it that she was physically and mentally there, or is it that she had given you lessons that helped you? Or both, probably.
It was more her lessons that she gave me, because, I mean, I wasn't going to tell her these things because, she had her stroke and she couldn't communicate. And, you never knew what she understood. And sometimes things would upset her and you wouldn't know, like she'd just be crying and you don't know why. And so I was like, I didn't tell her, but I remember the day that I came to visit her after I'd been diagnosed, and it was like she knew, and she wanted to say something to me and couldn't get it out. And I was like, I think she knows, but I'm not going to tell her because I don't want to hurt her, like make her sad or worry, because she always would worry about you if she knew something, bad happened or, because she loved you. And I didn't want her to do that. So, but no, it was just more thinking about how did she deal with these painful experiences and these things that happened to her, because, I had started my book, What Do You See at Liturgy, in 2014. I was taking graphic design course and everything was going great. I'm on my way. I'm finally going to do this. I'm going to do my first book. I'm going to go on this path. And then, my hands were numb. I couldn't figure it out. And then my vision in my one eye was going bad. I'm like, well, my hands and my vision, well, this is weird. Like, that's what an artist needs if I don't have these two skills. And so we had a friend that's an ophthalmologist, and he got me an MRI that day in the ER. He pulled some strings. He's like, you need to get into that. I want your diagnosis. So I went on steroids. I got diagnosed. And then a month later, my other eye acted up, which it shouldn't have acted up because I just had steroids. So then I got more steroids. It was really difficult at that time because my children were two, and I was struggling to take care of them. My brain was a mess. I couldn't really drive a lot. I did some, but I had to have people help me in the beginning with driving. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I started really praying a lot. And I prayed and prayed and prayed to the Theotokos specifically. I was doing the proclases every day. And I'm like, well, what's at the root cause of this? Why am I so sick? And how can I get better? Because I need to get better for my kids. I want to make it till they're 18. I need to be physically able to be there, driving them everywhere when they're in middle school and high school. I can't be like this. And the doctors weren't helping me. And then I found out that functional medicine opened up in Cleveland, in the Cleveland Clinic. So I got really excited. I called them. I'm like, yeah, this is, oh, no, wait, sorry. Before that, when I was praying, sorry, I skipped ahead. When I was praying, I ended up waking up in the middle of the night, and I had a tick bite in my leg. I woke up, and I thought I had a dream I had poison ivy, and there was a tick. So I knew about Lyme disease, and my doctor was kind of like, well, it's not in this area. Don't worry about it, blah, 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 blah. If you don't, you have to if you get a bullseye rash, then you have Lyme. You have to have a rash, which actually you don't. So I'm telling everyone, this is my PSA, my public service announcement. You do not have to have a bullseye rash to have Lyme. So
for real, just to our audience, if you suspect Lyme disease, push past the first or second or third doctor, because I don't know, I can't even tell you how many people I know were misdiagnosed, and the longer you wait, the worse it is, right? You have to get on the protocol now, and they need to give you those antibiotics immediately. And sometimes it takes a really long time because you don't have the bullseye rash or the one thing that doctor has decided you have to have. How long did it take before you got diagnosed?
Well, that happened in May, and then I think it was in August when I started antibiotics. But it was like MS to the extreme. I mean, my brain was a mess. I felt like I had dementia. I was searching drawers. And it's not like the normal thing when you walk in a room and you're like, oh, I forget why I was there. Everybody has that happen. This was different. I didn't even know how I got into the room. How did I get there? I don't even have any concept of what's in this room or knowing why I'm there. There were times, it's scary. And I mean, it would ebb and flow. So it would come and then it would go away, or not really ever go away, but it wouldn't be as bad as that. And then it would, or I'd be dry. Only last a few seconds where I had no idea where I was, no idea where it was going, no idea how I got into my car. And it would only last for a few minutes, or not a few minutes, like a few seconds, I don't know, 10 seconds, 20
Who
seconds.
knows?
But I
It
remember
must have
driving
felt
my
like
daughter to
forever, though.
preschool and getting terrified.
Wow. I
So,
mean, with kids in the car, especially, right? Like, because on a mother's heart, it really weighs that we're responsible for these very tiny little defenseless humans. And that moment of like, where am I? What am I doing? How did I get here? It's like, well, how am I going to take care of these kids if my brain is not
right.
kicked in all the time? So by August,
Mhm.
though, you were on antibiotic treatments. Did they make you
Mhm.
horrifically sick?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then,
Everyone I
then
know,
you're
it's all
dealing with the
been awful.
detox.
Yeah. It's horrible,
It's
right?
awful.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, the pain is so severe with Lyme disease. It was like so painful. And that's when I really relied on my Yiayia. You know, she had a lot of pain because, you know, she didn't have good nutrition growing up in Greece. So she had brittle bones and her bones were always breaking, and she just had like a lot of, you know, pain. And so that's when I really like try to focus. Okay, when I feel pain, that's my reminder to pray, you know, like we do when we fast. Oh, I really want a hamburger. Oh, I'm going to pray. That's my reminder. That's how I use it. You know, the positive, think positive, you know?
That's right.
So I just tried to focus on that. Yeah.
Glory to God.
And then that's when I started really, you know, so I prayed to the Theotokos. I ended up with this tick bite. And people think that's bad, but you know what? I ended up, you know, I was so sick that I ended up finding out about functional medicine at the Cleveland Clinic, and I called, and the lady was so nice, and she's like, I'm sorry, but it's a year wait. And
Oh my
I
gosh.
just started crying and crying. And I was like, you don't understand. If you don't help me, like, I might not be here in a year. Like, I just keep getting worse, and no one is helping me. And I had read, Dr. Mark Hyman is the one who started it at the Cleveland Clinic. I'd read his book years ago, and I was like, maybe he could help me one day, you know, in my mind. But so I started crying, and then she was like, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. And I'm like, I can't take care of my kids, all this. So we hang up, and I got off the phone, and I was praying as hard as I could pray. And I know it was like 20 minutes of praying. And I prayed to the Theotokos, like, look, you're a mother. Like, please pray for me because I need to be able to take care of my kids. So 20 minutes later, the woman calls back and says, look, I'm not allowed to do this, but I just had a cancellation. I'm getting you in a month. Can you come? I was like, of course. You know, I'll be there. And my doctor was so amazing. When I went there, he works with patients who have dementia and stuff. Like, so he worked with the brain, so it was really good. And we were doing the neurologic test, and I had to do, you know, touch my finger, touch your nose, and then I had to turn my hands up, you know, kind of like we do for Holy Unction. You do the top of the hand and then the palm, you know, and I had to keep up with him. And I had to go faster and faster, and it took so much brain power. So he looked me in the eye, and he said, there's always hope. And he's like, don't forget that. There's always hope. And I was like, oh, you're right. I should know this as a Christian, right? I should know this. Because the ironic thing is he's Jewish. So God used him in my life to tell me, like, look, there's always hope. And I knew that in my heart. I know that in my soul. But when you're going through it, you know, it's very hard to focus on that. Because you think, I'm just not going to make it. At what point, you know, I'm praying and nothing's happening. But when you look back, you see how everything was happening.
Yes.
So.
Oh, isn't that the truth, right? You think nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And you look back and you're like, look at everything that was like simmering. You know, it's praising. You can't see it, but it's happening. Oh, glory to God.
Right.
That's wonderful. So that's beautiful. I love that. And I love that you had these lessons from your grandmother that taught you to pray. And then here you are praying, and it's paying off as the Theotokos intervenes and gets you in there and touches people's hearts to hurry you along. But, okay, so I was just telling our audience, during our various technical difficulties, I told everybody about the various books that you've done, because you've done both. You did, as you mentioned, what I see at the liturgy, but you also did what I do at the liturgy, right? And I just want to
Yep. What
say
can I do at liturgy? Mhm.
thank you for those because they're so
Oh,
good. I was saying to the audience
thank
already,
you.
so sorry for repeating, guys, but she didn't hear it. But when you have little ones in the liturgy, they are antsy and they're restless, and giving them a book is really helpful. But of course, if you give them, the hungry caterpillar, you're just distracting them from liturgy. And
Mhm.
that's like questionable whether that's really beneficial, right? But to have these books about liturgy with pictures of people attending liturgy, it brings them more deeply into liturgy. And it's really so helpful and so wonderful. And so I encourage any of our listeners, if you have little ones, if you have godchildren, if you know somebody, this is a good gift. These are really good books. Where do they find these books if they want them?
They're available. I have an Etsy shop where I sell them, and they're also available at Ancient Faith. You can buy them there.
Yeah, the Ancient
Yeah.
Faith store,
So, and that was
store.ancientfaith.com.
exactly the reason. Oh, yes.
Yep.
Sorry. No, that's exactly why I made the books, because it says in Colossians something about if their minds are to be, or something about set their minds on things above. And I was like, if I'm going to distract my kids, I want them to be distracted on things above, on God, because we're in church, and I only allowed books, Christian books, and there weren't any at the time. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to make one.
Seriously, back then there were
So
so few. I mean, now, like you guys, if
there
you're
was one.
converting right now, or if you have toddlers right now, like lucky you, because there was a time, I converted in 1999. My daughter was born in 98. I mean, we just did not have things. And so when your books were coming out and when, all of these other books started coming out, it was so exciting. And now thank God, there's such a proliferation of these things. I'm so delighted. But so tell me a little bit about, I also, during the other break, told our audience a bit about Dr. Phil Mamalakis' book, Parenting Toward the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about how, it's so lovely to have, and I didn't say this, but so Dr. Phil is, he's a psychologist, right? He's trained, he's
Yep.
educated. He's not like just a religious guy giving you advice, which, might be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really nice to get modern psychology with this Orthodox perspective imbued in it, right? It's because it's really both.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, I don't want to say anything weird, but it's not just something wacky, right? It's not just like, listen, God wants you to do this. It's really him with a full modern understanding of the brain and how the brain works and how emotions work and all of these things, plus how do you orient your kids toward the kingdom. How is it that you got involved with this very cool project? And tell me about what it is that you guys have produced.
Yeah. Well, back in the day when I was younger and met my husband, I was trying to get Bible studies going because I really believe in small groups. I feel very strongly, and, we don't always have that for adults. We have a lot of people who are converts or, got married in the church. So now they're coming and they don't know people. Even me, I grew up at the Akron church, and then we ended up going to my husband's church, and I didn't know anyone. I knew some family, but that's it. So I feel very strongly. And so I started a parents group, and we used his book, and he came to the Cleveland area. We have a lot of Greek churches here, so he came to the area. And I told him about it, and I was like, look, I would like to, as I'm going through this, I would like to put some stuff on my blog and some questions that people could ask. And he was like, well, you know what? You're like the second or third person that's mentioned this to me, wanting to have we need a workbok to go with it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, we do. So he's like, would you be interested in it? And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Oh, that's
So
great.
me and then, two other women helped write this book. And we had all led our own groups.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, and it's true. I mean, you mentioned, people coming in from other traditions, right? And in the Protestant tradition, people are forever writing books and then also creating workbooks because the idea is that you should have a group who can sit together and read a chapter and then have something to do, something to discuss,
Right.
and then a way to apply it in their everyday lives for that week, and then come back and discuss it again. And this is something we Orthodox have been a little slow to adopt, but it's really a beautiful model, and it's really helpful. And as you mentioned, it's more than just, I'm going to learn the material in this book better. It's also, I'm going to get connected to other people in my parish, people who are struggling with the same things.
Yeah.
I mean, these groups, this is where we develop lifelong friendships that just change our lives. And Christianity is all about communion. Why are we not doing this more, right? It's thank God. I'm so glad that you guys put this together. I think it's so important and it's so helpful. And I just think, we just need so much more of this. But so thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is sort of the best or most important thing about Dr. Mamalakis's book that would make you pick that book to be one to help with? You could write a workbook for anything, right? But like, what is it about this book that's kind of meaningful enough that it is worth your time?
Well, it's because it's a parenting book. A lot of people, if they leave the church kind of when they're in college, they don't really come around, and then they come back when they have kids. So we're like, okay, you're all here now. Let's, do this book. And, I think it's really important because there's so many secular parenting books out there. There's, evangelical books out there for parenting. But this is an Orthodox book for parenting, and that's what is important. And that's what made me really want to work on it because, my background is in education, and a lot of the ideas I did learn, like in my education classes on how to, for classroom management and all of that. But, it's so neat to see it with an Orthodox, ethos to it, a spin on it. You know what I mean? It's just like we have something that we can use in our lives, to help us raise our children and become, strong Orthodox Christians when they grow up.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, it is. It's a fantastic book, and it's such a blessing to have a workbook so that we can really use it to the most benefit in our parishes. So thank you for putting your time into that, and really for all of your projects, because you've written several books and then illustrated other books, and all of them help us to bring our families and our children, and I should say all of us, because honestly, our kids learn from these books, but we learn a lot reading these books to our children. That's a big part of the journey. But so thank you for all of that. I think it's so helpful and such a blessing to everybody.
Thank you.
Well, Christina, it has been such a joy speaking with you, and I'm so glad that we finally got our technology issues in order so that we were able to hear more about your grandmother and more about you and this journey that you've been on. I have one last question. Are you okay now with the Lyme disease, and is all of this kind of in check now, or is this something that you're still living with?
Yeah, I'll always have MS. My whole life. The Lyme is better. Like, I don't have that constant pain anymore. Some pain from the MS, but I'm on a good medicine right now and everything's working. Without functional medicine, though, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't be as healthy as I am. So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
Thank God. Thank God. Well, that is good to hear. And thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. This has been delightful.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I was delighted. I was thrilled to have you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And come back next Sunday night and we'll meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. We'll see you then.